joined live in studio with Oakville, Ontario artist Justin Gray. So, Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks a lot for coming in. I know you're out at the bar earlier. It's pretty awesome. Which one did you go to?
I went to the California pub. I was here 45 minutes early, so I just went out a beer.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's a good bar. It's the only one that's really close to here.
Yeah.
Actually, if there's a place just down the street, they sell beer for $2.50.
Well, you should have told me about that before I got here.
Wish you'd informed me that you're coming earlier. We could have gone together. Anyway, how did you get your start in music, Justin?
Well, it's kind of a funny question because I've never been able to really identify where I started with music. I've always been into music as far back as I can remember, since I was a toddler even. One of my first memories with music is when I was with my cousin playing drums on pots and pans and using sticks with wooden spoons and just making drum beats. Even though it probably didn't sound good at the time, it was fun and I loved it, and that's what we did. That's really the first memory I have with music. But in terms of playing guitar, that started with my brother. We were growing up together, and he started playing guitar a lot earlier than I did. And he kind of started playing, and I started looking up to him as any younger brother really does.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually he went away to university, and he gave me his guitar since he couldn't play electric guitar in university.
Right.
So I started to pick it up as he left, and I played more and more, and I never put it down until he got back, and that's pretty much where I am right now.
What was the biggest challenge in learning to play the guitar?
I think the biggest challenge was the first couple of years when I really didn't know how to play, because I was supposed to play a left-handed guitar.
Okay.
Because I'm left-handed normally, and my brother's guitar was right-handed, and I didn't think to flip it over like Jimi Hendrix did back in the day. So I actually taught myself how to play right-handed guitar when I'm supposed to play left-handed guitar, which is kind of like teaching yourself how to write with your right hand if you're left-handed.
I don't think I could do that.
It was very difficult.
Yeah.
So what I remember is when I was in grade 7, I was in music class, and we all had to pick an instrument. I don't know if you remember.
I remember those days.
So, you could have picked trumpet or trombone or
saxophone,
anything really.
Stuff.
So I picked the bass guitar, and obviously at public school they only have a right-handed bass guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first real forced attempt. I was, graded on my ability to play this instrument.
Right.
So I was playing this right-handed guitar left-handed, and my music teacher would yell at me saying, no, you can't do that, you'll fail.
Wow.
So I had no choice but to flip it over and literally force myself into playing an uncomfortable way of playing it. So I did that for, I guess, whatever it was, 4 months, and eventually I got a little bit more comfortable with it. It was still more difficult, and I had the natural tendency to want to flip it over and play the other way.
Right.
But I didn't do that. So naturally that transcribed into the guitar, playing it the opposite way and on the right-handed way. And I developed the ability to play both ways. So I could. It was almost like Michelangelo Badio. He could play both ways, if you know who that is.
Yeah, yeah.
He plays both guitar left and right-handed, but it took me a while to be able to switch from right-handed to left-handed guitar, or vice versa. And eventually I became kind of better at it because I was left-handed, so I could write with my left hand, but I was fingering with my left hand now, so it was a little bit
interesting.
It was a little different. Whereas before I would supposed to pick with my left hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of inverting it that way, but it was different.
Was it hard to break that? There must be that natural feeling where you're like, this doesn't feel right.
It was extremely difficult.
How did you? What sort of things did you do? You just force yourself to do it? No matter
I just forced it. I just loved music in general, for one thing, and I just like listening to music. I listened to many bands when I was younger and artists, and I wanted to play and sound like them, so I forced myself into learning the guitar the only way I could,
right,
which is right-handed.
That actually leads into my next question, which is to describe to the listeners out there your musical influences.
That's a very difficult question. The only really way I could adequately answer that is if you came to my house and looked at all the albums that I've purchased. Like, honestly, there's been so many influences for the past 12 years that I've been playing guitar. It started with, the pop rock.
Right.
Listening to Blink-182 and Offspring and Sum 41 and all those bands.
Yep.
That was when I started to develop learning how to do power chords and very, very basic melodies and very basic rhythm.
Okay.
And once I developed that, I kind of grew out of that and went on to a very, very different genre, which was heavy metal.
Yeah.
So actually, it's funny. The first concert I went to was Ozzy Osbourne in grade 8,
Oh, right on.
which was about a year after I started playing guitar. And at that time, it wasn't Randy Rhoads playing, but Randy Rhoads was one of my bigger influences.
Oh, okay.
But unfortunately, it wasn't Randy Rhoads. But I was at this concert, and I saw Zakk Wylde playing the guitar, that signature Les Paul with the circles,
Oh, yeah.
and I just loved it. There's something, I guess it was kind of a connection that I had, or perhaps a moment that I kind of realized I should start switching my genre of playing. So I went into this more of a melodic metal phase in my playing, where I played a lot more solos,
Very cool.
whereas opposed to before I was playing a lot more rhythm and very simple licks, like the Blink-182 or the Sum 41 licks. And eventually I just developed this love for going fast. I would continue to play as fast as I could. At this point, I really didn't have very much care for control in terms of the space between the notes and the the rests and things like that. But I was more focused on the speed and the technique. So I think that was actually a very educational phase in my guitar career, because it taught me that you could go fast and it could sound good, but only if you have a lot of distortion.
Right.
Right. So after I got this metal phase, there was actually this one moment in my life that I remember very distinctly. I was driving, I don't know where it was. It might have been a soccer practice or a hockey practice, like in Oakville with my dad, and a Stevie Ray Vaughan song came on the radio.
Right on.
It was Cold Shot by Stevie Ray Vaughan, Double Trouble.
It's a nice song.
Very good bluesy song with lots of soul. And at that point, I thought I was invincible at guitar. I thought I could do anything, but I really had no clue. This was in grade 10 or so. And my dad told me, if you can play this like Stevie Ray Vaughan can play this, if you can play it with as much soul and passion and ability, I will buy you a Stratocaster like Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Wow.
So I took that to heart. I went home the same night, and for months after that, I tried to learn it. I just tried and tried and tried and tried. I failed. And it took a long time, many, 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 many years, until I could actually play it, not even close to as well as he could. That took a long time to play, not even as close as him.
That goes to show how talented he is, but how much dedication you had too.
Yeah, definitely. It took a long time. So maybe 3 or 4 years, I would play it a lot, and I would think I could play it, but looking back now, I couldn't play it really nearly as well as he could. But that's moment where I was I kind of changed the genres I like to play.
Right.
And that was when I transitioned from the hard rock to the blues. And now I consider myself as a blues guitar player when I'm not writing my own music.
Right.
Because of that moment. And that was a long, long time ago. And now I feel like I can actually play, obviously not the same caliber as Stevie Ray Vaughan, but close enough that I could mimic it. And that is why my dad bought me a Stratocaster a couple of years ago.
So you got to that point though, your dad felt, okay, you've done a good job. It's close.
Yeah, that was definitely a defining moment in my guitar playing career.
Now, you're from Oakville, and we went to high school together. Talk to me about being a musician from Oakville, and what are the challenges of being from Oakville when you got a heavy market like Toronto nearby and a heavy market like Hamilton nearby?
Sure. Well, Oakville it's kind of a microcosm. It's a bubble in itself. There's anybody from Oakville that's listening, like my friend Jake, he's definitely listening. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's a bubble. There's the things within Oakville, and then the things that happen within Oakville, but they don't really affiliate with the things outside of Oakville.
That is very true.
It's unfortunate, and that goes with the music as well, because when you go and try to book gigs in Oakville or try to go to open mics in Oakville, there's very limited options.
For those listening that don't know of Oakville, Oakville is sort of a suburban community outside of Toronto, Ontario. And, there's a lot of money in Oakville, and there is definitely a bubble there.
Definitely. It's kind of unfortunate.
So with booking gigs, I mean, you just mentioned, I know there's CJ's Cafe. That's one of them. I know there's a couple other venues. Is your choices so limited that you do have to just generally go elsewhere?
Usually, yes. There's a few pubs in Oakville that do book, and I've put my CDs in, and I've played at a couple bars in Oakville. And in terms of open mic for artists that haven't been able to actually get a solo gig yet,
Right.
there's very few options. Like there's the Moonshine Cafe, which I've gone to a few times, and there's a couple other bars in Mississauga, for example, or if you want to go to Hamilton, there's a couple more, or there's lots in Toronto.
Yeah.
But in Oakville, if you don't have a car or you have to take the bus or something, it's very difficult to actually expand your musical ability in terms of playing live. So that's why I kind of don't enjoy playing music in Oakville very much.
Where do you enjoy playing music then?
Well, I do play in Oakville as much as I can, and
Right.
like I play at a couple pubs in Oakville. But what I did do that actually let me develop my skill in terms of live playing was I moved away for a job up north where they had an open mic every week, but it was a town that was very, very small. So it wasn't populated at all, and there was
Curious.
It was in Deep River, Ontario.
Okay, yeah, I know where that is.
Which is, for anybody listening, is near Pembroke or about an hour north of Ottawa. And this pub, they had about 3 hours open mic a night, and they would only have a couple artists come out. So I could play every week for a couple hours.
Great practice time.
Exactly, and it allowed me to kind of, develop my skills of live playing and being comfortable in front of a crowd and being able to take requests if they ever do shut out and I knew them.
I guess that must be really important too. Is not only just your stage presence is definitely a key.
Absolutely, it was like the first few times I played, I was had stage fright.
Right.
But that went away after a couple months of playing open mic every single week for hours a week, and I probably have a couple hundred hours now, or maybe even close to 1,000 hours of open mic time. That just because of that and playing in Hamilton every week as well.
That's key, and it's difficult when you do come from an environment like Oakville, where there's probably quite a few other artists fighting over the same bars as you were probably fighting to get playing time in.
Exactly. That's one of the biggest issues. In Oakville, you go to the open mic places that do actually have them, like we were speaking about before, and you'd have to wait a couple hours to play 2 songs, which is, it's fun to play, but it's not fun to wait just to play. But the talent is obviously fun to watch. But it gets a little bit frustrating.
Now, you mentioned that you went up to Deep River for school or for work, that sort of thing. You also attended McMaster for engineering. So how are you able to balance sort of music on the side with going to school?
I don't do anything else on my free time. That's pretty much it. I come home from school, or I came home from work, or whatever it is, and I don't watch TV. I don't really watch movies or do a lot of other things that a lot of other people's time.
There's no hockey to watch anyway.
Exactly. don't get me started on the NHL. But yeah, honestly, I come home and all my free time is devoted to music, and I just love it. So I do it. It's just one of those things that it's not even. Like the time passes by so quickly that it's not even like you're spending time doing it.
It's like second nature. You just come home, music. Right
exactly.
Yeah. So talk a bit about your music then. You came up with the song Clarity, and just talk to me a bit before you get into the song about your songwriting and what sort of things inspire you to write songs.
That's a tough question. The inspiration kind of comes very randomly. I don't just sit down and decide to write a song. There's certain moments in my life that might inspire me to write, or perhaps there's a certain mood I'm feeling that will inspire me to write, or perhaps I'm just fiddling around the guitar and I come up with this cool lick, and then that lick sticks with me for months, and then I don't have lyrics with it, but eventually I come across this mood, or I feel a certain persona that I want to actually write with it, and that's usually how my songs come together. I usually have the guitar part written first, and it's probably written for months because I play guitar nonstop.
Right.
And then once it's written and I have this mood and I kind of can relate the two in terms of tempo and the feel and the color of the song, if you will, like it kind of they come together, and then I just sit down and I write the lyrics based on the mood I'm feeling or the thing that's happened in my life. And then they come together nicely, and then I produce them on my computer, and then that's how they come.
What's the hardest part about producing your own music?
The hardest part is being a perfectionist.
Can see that.
I will never produce or release a song that isn't, in my ears, perfect. There have been times, and there are songs that I have produced on the internet that now, after I look back, after writing for a couple of years now, I look back and I see, oh, I could have done that better.
Right.
I realize that I can do it better, and I probably will before I actually release my album. I'll probably redo a couple, vocal parts or guitar parts or whatever it might be to make it perfect in my ear now. but it really depends on how I'm feeling at the moment in terms of writing. So it has to be perfect at the time.
I guess then, because you are a perfectionist, what sort of things have you learned from you first starting to produce that you now know now, other than just noticing the little bits and pieces in songs? Is there certain techniques that you do to produce music that you're like, oh, I didn't know this before, but I've just learned over trial and error?
Absolutely, yeah. There are things like, for example, using a metronome is obviously very important. But when I was first starting to write music and produce it, and a lot of these songs that I really started, or my first couple songs haven't actually been posted on the internet, but their tempo isn't consistent. It might vary by a couple beats per minute, but it's not like it's a huge variance, but it's not perfect in terms of tempo from beginning to end. And I feel like now that I've realized that I have to have a consistent tempo the entire song using the metronome, whatever the time signature might be, it has to be always the same. Otherwise, it just doesn't sound right.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the major things I've noticed. Otherwise, it's a lot of fiddling with different effects. So you can use different compressors and
Right.
different reverbs and harmonies and things to kind of augment the song to the next level.
Let's talk a little bit about where you sort of see yourself in the next couple of years. You just sort of mentioned that you plan on releasing an album at some point. So where do you see yourself headed in the next year?
Well, my plan is to finish my album by this summer. All the songs are written.
Right on.
They're just not all produced. That's the biggest time-consuming thing, is the production of the actual music.
Mhm.
Since I do it all myself, I have Ableton Live with my computer and my little M-Audio
Right.
audio interface and my condenser microphone. It takes a long time to produce it, master it, make it sound the exact way I want to,
Mhm.
make it comfortable with how I want it to be, and then let it sink in for a while, and then think about it again. Because eventually I might change my mind over a
Right.
certain phrase or a certain guitar part or something, and that happens all the time. So before I actually post songs on the internet, or if I tell my friends about it or my family or anybody, I usually let it sink in for a while just to make sure I'm comfortable with it.
How long does it take roughly to produce one song?
It depends on the complexity. If it's just a simple acoustic and vocal, it could take a day.
Mhm.
If it has more instruments and has strings and or MIDI controllers or any type of things that I would have to think about longer, it could take up to a week or a month, or a couple months. It really depends on how much free time I spend on it, and which doesn't, free time is tough to come by. So
Yeah, I know that feeling very well. You also are working full time, and we won't get into that obviously, but let's how do you try to balance life between just your work and that's obviously can take a lot of your time, and not only just during the day but during your weekends as well. So how do you really try to balance both?
Well, like I said earlier, I go to work in the day, and then I come home, and then I work on my music, and it's really as simple as that. It's night and day.
Right on. Fair
And
enough.
I do that enough, and it's what I love to do, so why not? Like, instead of loving to watch TV or loving to cook or loving to whatever else people love to do, which there can be a million things,
Right.
my thing is music, so I love to come home and produce music and write music and play music and anything music.
Is there a certain venue in the city here in Toronto that you'd love to perform at?
Well, obviously I'd love to play at the ACC.
Yeah,
but,
that'd be pretty sweet.
yeah, eventually I like to play at a couple bars. Like, there's the Beer Garden that I know they have a lot of bands come in for. There's usually a couple hundred people there. Or perhaps if I can get lucky in my career, play at the Sound Academy or the Docks or any of those smaller venues that aren't small but are smaller than the major venues that are still. They're
Reputable little bars in
reputable,
the city.
exactly. Yeah.
There's a few key ones out here that are pretty good at that. We're going to talk about clarity, but first we're going to and welcome back to Radio Nation. That was Your Mystery by Justin Gray, who's live in studio with us. Justin, thanks a lot for coming on tonight.
Not a problem. I'm having a great time. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So, of course, the interview's got a little bit more to go before we get to our next interview, which is a New Hollow at 8:30 tonight. So we got about 10 minutes or so before the next interview. So I wanted to ask, how do people find you on social media?
Well, I'm on all of the major sites. I got a Facebook site, I got a Twitter site, I'm on YouTube, and I'm on Reverb Nation, which is a growing music site
I love Reverb Nation.
Reverb Nation is where I post all my music, and I kind of use that as a link through Facebook and Twitter.
It's like your own web page for your music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's the home page.
It's amazing, actually. I love it a lot too.
Yeah, it's a pretty vital tool, actually. I think every musician should at least have a page or be using it in some fashion.
Absolutely.
Do you have a preferred favorite social media tool? I guess probably Reverb Nation.
It is Reverb Nation, absolutely, because for one thing, I have almost 400 fans on Reverb Nation. But I would say I would want to get more fans on Facebook and Twitter, just because those are the ones people affiliate with most and use most. So if anybody out there is listening and likes what they have heard in that last song or the next couple songs they might hear, please go on to both Twitter and Facebook and search my name, and I would appreciate all the extra fans.
We just tweeted his last song, so you can definitely check it out if you're listening. And even if you don't have Twitter, the playlist is right on the side of the webpage there if you scroll down a little bit. So you should be able to see what we've been recently playing, and you can check out his Twitter handle if you want to. And if you don't have Twitter, you should sign up and follow him, because it'd be worth it. And then follow the show, too, as well. All right, Justin, so we're going to ask some fun questions here. But before I get to that, I just want to talk about your next song, Clarity. Talk a little bit about how you came up with that song.
Sure. Clarity is actually one of the first songs I wrote when I was starting to seriously write. It was probably, I would say, in I'm talking about third-year university, or between second and third-year university, so the summer of 2010, I guess that would be. What went through my mind? I don't really know. It was kind of one of those moments that you just get in a mood and you start feeling the vibe and you start writing and you start making rhymes and you kind of connect the dots, and it just kind of came together, and it all came into a certain theme of being, like having peace with everybody. And like if you listen to the chorus, it's about spreading messages to your your offspring and your kids and anybody else in the lower generation of serenity or of love and peace, which it might sound a little bit wacky, but it's what it was about. And it was just kind of the mood I was feeling at the time, and I wrote into it, and the choruses kind of came together and the verses all kind of blended, and the guitar part I thought sounded nice, and the guitar part came first, which is what usually happens with my writing, and then I just combined the two together, and then it came.
We're going to switch gears here a little bit and talk a little bit about some random questions we like to ask, fun, quirky questions on the show. And one of them is, I guess, what was your favorite subject in high school?
It's a funny question. High school was a good time. It was easy. I think that math was my favorite subject. I like math a lot because, for one thing, math and music are the exact same thing.
Yeah.
If you think in that level that, there's all the intervals and all the scales and, the distances between notes and, if you're using modes and all these things in music, it's all math. I like math a lot for that reason, and I also liked physics because of, for whatever reason I liked physics. I liked the math that was in physics, and I liked also the strings that were, and in terms of the, the harmonics, and I could relate it with music. That was one of the bigger reasons, really, that I liked physics so much, is that I could relate it with music.
NHL off season. NHL is kind of off, so I guess it is a bit of an off season. Scale of 1 to 10, how pissed off are you about that there's no hockey to watch?
I don't think there's a number to extremely describe. I really got into the Leafs last season when I was living up north. I didn't have too much to do other than go to work, play music, and when I wasn't playing music, I would watch the Leafs. I liked them a lot, and unfortunately, I've lost a lot of my momentum that I gained when I was into them last year, and it's too bad for. I'm sure a lot of fans feel the same way, that or have an NHL team or whatever it might be, but it's disappointing that the billionaires and millionaires can't get over themselves.
It's a little discouraging when you have millionaires that just cry like they're poor. Because look, I could if you want to, Crosby, if you want to give me like 10% of your salary. I'd be pretty happy. I don't know who wouldn't, right? 10% of $12 million is still a lot of money.
Yeah, no kidding.
Favorite childhood memory?
Childhood memory? That is definitely an interesting one. I actually don't have a lot of memories from before I was probably 7. I don't know why, I just don't. I remember playing a lot of, or building a lot of structures like with Connects and Lego when I was younger. That was a lot of fun. And playing on the pots and pans, that was a lot of fun. Jumping on my trampoline and getting pushed around by my brother, that was a lot of fun. All these things were fun, but in terms of a favorite memory, I really can't articulate one at this point.
Final question before I let you go tonight is this. mentioned off air that, or mentioned before the break that you know you sort of see yourself, you know, coming out with a new album. Where do you see yourself in long term wise with your music?
Well, if I can get lucky and I can actually make something out of this, I'd pursue it. I'd completely pursue it and be a touring musician. That's the dream, really. Be a touring musician, having fans come out to your show, more fans every time. You know, first it's 100 or so, then it's a couple hundred, then it's 1,000. Before you know it, you sell at the ACC.
Well,
that's the dream, of course.
Hopefully one day that'll happen for you.
Perhaps. You know, that in terms of 5 years, there's two streams. Either I get lucky or I don't get lucky. If I get lucky, what we just talked about. If I don't get lucky, I'll keep doing what I'm doing and writing and having fun with it and playing bars and, you know, jamming with friends and, you know, being in bands and just doing that for the sake of loving it.
All right, Justin, it's been good to see you. It's been a while, so it's thanks a lot for coming on the show tonight and making the hike from Oakville to Toronto here.
No problem. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, so before you go, we're going to play your song Clarity here on Radio Nation. So for those listening, you can follow Justin at Justin K. Gray on Twitter, and this is the song Clarity. You're listening to Radio Nation. I'm your host, Nicholas Pescod.